Good News Sports is brought to you by Faith Life Financial and Wise Choices.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Edge on Good News Sports. I'm your host, Glenn Allen. It's been said that bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. When we don't forgive, we become bitter. Forgiveness is a powerful force that many men have never even tapped into. Today on the show, you'll hear a man struggle to forgive his dad, and another man knowing what it's like to be on the receiving end of forgiveness from his wife. Let's meet the Edge panel here on Good News Sports from the Drew Marshall radio show. Drew Marshall.
Drew Marshall?
Drew Marshall. This is a little Danny Gallivan there, buddy.
Yeah, this is going to be a heavy show, man.
It will be. Also on the program tonight, he's a former CFL Superstar quarterback. Welcome, Kent Austin.
How you doing?
Good, buddy. Good to see you.
Good.
Also on the program today, Director of Ministry Relations from Crossroads, David Rutledge.
Sir. Great to be here.
Good to have you. And finally, once a WWE Superstar wrestler, today an ordained minister, the $1 Million Man. Please welcome Ted DiBiase.
Hey, Glenn, how are you, man?
Good, buddy. How you doing?
Hey, guys, how are you?
Hey. Guys, as we, a lot of times on the program we were talking sports and doing this, that, and the other thing. As guys sitting around a table like this talking about forgiveness, I mean, there are some stories that are pretty heavy. But wow, what a freedom when we finally understand what forgiveness is, and hopefully the people watching the show today, in particular guys, will understand that holding grudges and bitterness and what have you, and not forgiving is actually hurting them. And, I go back to being sexually abused over an 8-year period by a hockey coach. And for years, stuffing all my feelings and all the hurt, shame, guilt, pain with alcohol and cocaine, and not realizing that for years later, in my early 30s, finally understanding, having somebody come into my life and show me and teach me that forgiveness was, and by forgiving this coach, actually was the key to opening my prison door and allowing me to be free. That all that hatred and bitterness was actually hurting me and all the choices and decisions I was making, and it near killed me. And there's so many people in our society today walking around with that. So hopefully watching the program today, we're starting a little heavy, but by the end of it, hopefully the guys and the gals are going to see that, boy, if God can work this way in our lives, he can work in yours too. Ted, you have a great story of forgiveness from your wife.
Absolutely. Nobody, and I've told so many people this, nobody in my entire life has illustrated to me the love, compassion, and the mercy of Jesus Christ more than my own wife. I came to that point in time in my life and career where I had thought I had everything, and I was caught in adultery and confessed to adultery on a multiple scale, a confession that I knew was going to cost me everything. And because of my wife being grounded in her relationship with God and her willingness to forgive and show me mercy, it was like a two-year ordeal. It wasn't like, okay, I believe you. It's like, I think you really mean it, but I'm going to have to see the fruit of what you're saying. But nonetheless, her willingness, and she even said this to me, she said, I'm not sure I can make this. She says, but I know that my God is a God of restoration and not divorce. And because I love the Lord, I'm going to give you this opportunity to prove yourself. And I've been a different man ever since. And my wife and I today are happier and more intimate than we've ever been. And a lot of my old buddies, all my old WWF friends said, oh gosh, Ted, don't ever tell the truth. She might forgive you, but she ain't never going to forget. She's going to throw it in your face the rest of your life. Not one time. Mm-hmm. Not one time.
That's amazing. That's truly amazing.
You see, I think one of the key principles in forgiveness is realizing that forgiveness is not a feeling. Forgiveness is a choice.
That's
right. Your wife had to make a choice. Many times when we've dealt with people through counseling and in some pastoral ministry, we've had to bring them to the place where we let them know that they have to use their will. I need to choose to forgive. And also it becomes a life principle. Every morning when I get up, I have to face that day with this premise: I will forgive. I'm going to choose, because we're going to get hurt. Things are going to happen, maybe not on this scale like this every day, but we need to live with this principle that it's not a feeling, because sometimes you don't feel. You want to drive the person that hurt you.
Yep.
That's feelings. That's reaction.
And you know what? I'm glad you bring that point up, David, because it was a person who I had asked to be in my life, who actually asked the tough questions about whether I had forgiven my abuser, because he still saw something in me, even though I got clean from alcohol and drugs, and I was going through the recovery process. And he asked me straight up, he said, "Have you forgiven your abuser?" And I said, "Well, I think so." And shortly thereafter, three nights later, I had a dream. I ran into him, and I beat him to a pulp. And I called him the next day and I went, "Remember that question you asked me? Yeah. I think there's still some issues." And he walked through it with me, and actually it was a choice. He said, because in the beginning, when it come down to the bare bones, I didn't want to, because I was still mad. Yep. He stole something from me, and what I knew as a young boy growing up and as a young man, when you took something from me, I was going to fight back. And by saying to God, which goes totally against what I was brought up and what this world taught me to do, I was able to go through prayer, which he led, and I said, "God, I don't know what really is going on here, but Malcolm Smith walked me through this, Unconditional Love Ministries in Texas." What a great man. He walked me through, and I did a prayer, and I trusted. I trusted him, and I trusted God. And over 2 or 3 weeks, something changed in my heart. I cannot put words to it. All I know is when I heard that person's name, I no longer wanted to hurt him. Yeah. I actually felt sorry for him, and I began to pray for him.
So you don't want to pound the guy now?
No.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not.
All the stuff that he did to you, I mean, just flipping did to you, and you get yourself in that headspace, you don't want to beat the snot out of him?
Because it's not going to prove anything. It's not going to prove it. I was released. I came out of that prison. And I don't want to get into a whole bunch of Christianese type of lingo or anything like that, because I'm sure there's people watching the program going, "Well, get out of your prison. What are you talking about?" There was a freedom that came with it. It's indescribable. I couldn't. If somebody told me, you're going to be free, it's like, yeah, whatever. I'm going to still want to pound it, but something changed inside of me, and I didn't want it. It was actually helped me on my way to learn how to love.
Freedom is the right word, man, because, through my wife's example, and it absolutely overwhelmed me that she was willing to forgive me and willing to try. What I then had to face and began to realize was that, after my father's death and my mother's turning to alcohol, that I had some issues in my life. I was holding on to some things and realized that, I was bitter about. I was angry. I was still angry at my mother, and that what? As long as I was holding on to that, I was a prisoner of it. Yep, and until I released it, until I just said, "I forgive you," and when I forgave her, I was set free.
That's right.
Kent, here you are as an athlete. You played a little St. Louis in the National Football League. You come up to the CFL in Saskatchewan, BC, Toronto. But somewhere inside there was an issue that you had with your dad, and it was a long process. Take us through that.
I'll try to give you the 50,000-foot level Reader's Digest version. My dad left my mom when I was a senior in high school. I had a 12-year-old sister at home, and he actually left her when she was going through cancer and had a mastectomy and walked out on us. And I was, I got to be honest with you guys, I was mad. And I was the only guy in the family really that stood up to my father, and I harbored a lot of anger and a lot of bitterness, and for me it was more the bitterness in my life was more insidious. It grew on me as I got older, without me even knowing it. I mean, I was a believer at that time, and it
was left unresolved.
It was, and bitterness kind of begets bitternness, and it starts to show up in other areas of your life in almost a slight way, in a way that you don't even really recognize. And I started to realize how hard I was starting to become as a person in general to other people and other relationships in my life, and it was all as a result of that. You talk about feelings and that forgiveness is a choice, and that's exactly true. But by using a spiritual word, by taking the leap of faith to choose to forgive, then all the other stuff is unlocked. Right. And then all the other hard issues are unlocked. Like you mentioned, your ability to love again, to love anew and afresh. And and to accept somebody without any strings attached. You know, I had to learn in my life that I was accepted by my Creator with no, you know, quid pro quo involved. I mean, he went and did what he did and didn't ask me what I thought about it. He did it anyway, simply because it was a heart choice for him. Therefore, I had to learn that I didn't need to harbor any expectations in my life about people, that we need to accept them and love on them unconditionally.
You're shaking your head.
I just can't believe your dad did that.
Yeah.
What an idiot. Like,
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, you know, and it was still, to this day, the choices that he made are idiotic in my mind. But that doesn't mean that I can't forgive him.
is he still in your life?
Oh, he's a part of my life now. Yeah,
Oh,
we totally reconciled. You know, I gave up that bitterness and forgave my father, and we have a relationship now. Yeah.
The reality is that unforgiveness never stays at that level.
That's right.
It starts with a hurt, you know, in whatever shape or form, but it goes from this unresolved hurt to become this issue of unforgiveness that leads to bitterness. Bitterness doesn't stay bitterness. Bitterness will morph into anger.
Actually, you know what, David, just to keep that thought, because we're going to pick that up on the other side of the break. Today, talking about forgiveness on Good News Sports. Please stay tuned, back right after this.
The preceding segment has been brought to you by Faith Life Financial.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Good News Sports. Glenn Allen, Drew Marshall, Kent Austin, David Rutledge, Ted DiBiase. Today on the Edge Round Table, or goalie stick table, we are talking about forgiveness. And one of the things I really want to make clear as we move forward here is forgiving someone doesn't necessarily mean, like, especially in my case, when if someone's watching and someone has abused you or what have you, forgiveness isn't saying that what they did to you was in any way okay.
Right.
Nor is it saying that you have to be their best friend. You're in a very wonderful position where you reconciled and you and your dad were able to become friends.
But me and my dad are not super close, though.
Yeah.
I want to be honest about that.
Yeah.
You know, those are great points. I mean, forgiving him doesn't have anything to do with whether or not I like him. You know, I'm trying to like him and trying to, you know, and still trying to work through that. But that's an issue between me and my Creator, not really between me and my Father.
Yeah, it's a heart change. And David, just before we go to you, Ted, David, just before the break, we left off with you.
You mentioned off the top about the poison.
Yeah.
And really, unforgiveness is a poison that just creates this worsening sense of infliction in our own souls, because unforgiveness will lead to this sense of bitterness. Bitterness undealt with leads to hatred. You'll end up hating the person. And of course, I believe hatred not dealt with will lead to thoughts of murder. You'll wish the person were dead. And
which is true in my case. I mean,
yeah. The reality is, Glenn, and I haven't shared this with too many people, and certainly not on television. I have a similar story. Age 12, age 13, molestation by a guy. And I had to come to a point where we talk about freedom, and I think the essence of forgiveness is this issue of freedom, letting them go. I'm not responsible to deal with them, to judge them. That's God's place.
And it's not my fault.
And it's not my fault. I have to let them go, because that opens that emotional prison that held us with shame and guilt and fear.
The other thing, David, if I could hold that thought,
Yeah.
the other thing too, on a grander spiritual picture here, you know, in the world, we want to cast these guys aside and this, that, or the other thing. But by forgiving them, it allows for God to begin working in their life as well.
Absolutely.
Hold on, are you saying that all these pervs and molesters and murderers and whatever else is out there, you know, we categorize all these evil people, whatever categories we have. Are you saying that they shouldn't be punished and we should just do the Jesus thing and love and peace?
No, you're responsible for making your poor choices. And when you do, unfortunately, in Canada, these guys don't get nearly enough time. No. And you know, until you figure out what to do with them, they should be locked up. And no, there's consequences for making
Absolutely.
poor choices, and there's consequences for being that type of a person making those choices. And unfortunately, in Canada, we don't dole out the proper punishment. That's a whole other show, whole other thing.
Yep.
But continue on.
Well, unforgiveness then in those cases is not going to affect them. It's only poisoning you.
Exactly.
That's the point.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's the issue of forgiveness,
That's-
where
Guys,
I need to let
we've
these
said
people.
this 5 times here already.
Okay.
5 times. This, if you don't forgive them, then it's going to mess you up. If you don't forgive them, it's going to mess you up. We all flip and know this cognitively, but for some reason, forgiveness is
No,
one
I
of the
don't
hardest
think we
things
all
to
do.
do.
No,
You
I
reckon?
don't, I don't think we all do. I think a lot of men pay a lot of lip service to their definition of what forgiveness is. I really do. I think a lot of men say their idea of forgiveness is I'm past that now.
Yeah.
You know, that's another chapter of my life that happened
You mean like a
8
la,
years
la,
ago.
la, la,
yeah,
la,
yeah,
la.
Never
you know
dealt with
what?
it. Never dealt with it. But
I've
you
turned my
said-
back on
you
it.
said
I've walked this
before.
way, and it's behind me, and it's not. It's
But
in here.
you said it before. It comes out in different ways. How many people are walking around in our churches today holding grudges and bitterness
Tons.
because of tiny little disagreements here, there, and everywhere about
The most
frivolous
judgmental
thing.
place in the world is the church, unfortunately.
is.
Which is pathetic.
Get in a circle.
Yeah.
StrewMarshall.ca. and another question is, and not so much on, well, maybe on the abuser side, but in the case of your dad and of your wife, in your case, Ted, she trusted you again over time. It wasn't so much saying I'm sorry, it was making the amend, and actually the amend is change. Change over time proves the person that I am. So do you trust, when you forgive someone, can you ever trust them again? And I think on certain levels you can.
You know, like one of the things that my wife said to me initially, in her hurt and in her pain, you know, through her faith, she said, "I've got to make a decision." She says, "I've got to decide whether you're sorry or just sorry you got caught." She said, "But either way, I'm compelled through my faith and my love for Jesus Christ to forgive you, and you are forgiven." Well, that didn't mean it that. She says, "I don't know if I'm strong enough to stay with you, to live with you." She says, "But I do forgive you." So I mean, the only reason that I didn't suffer the full consequence of the choice that I had made by being unfaithful to my wife was her faith and her willingness to give me the opportunity to prove myself, and for me not to just have empty words and tears, but to bear fruit.
Let me ask.
See a changed character.
Let me ask you this. It's you know, the guys are watching, and I know we're watching too, but the guys are watching and going, football, wrestling,
Radio. Oh, it's not tough.
So you're in the dressing room, and I touched on the church thing, and how people walk around phony a lot of the times. But you're in the dressing room, locker room, and there's rifts, there's this, there's that. It's all well and good for us to sit out here and go, I forgave my abuser. I mean, God has shown me numerous times, it's like, you can forgive that guy for doing what he did to you, but you won't go over there and talk to your brother, and why don't take the high road, walk over, be humble, and mend the fence. What's going on? Why are guys so afraid to make that first step of humility?
Ego and pride. They're afraid to take off the mask.
Because they'll be seen as?
Weak.
Yeah.
Being weak.
And we don't want to have somebody get one up on us too.
Yeah.
That's that we're afraid to forgive thing, and then they're getting one up on us. I think it boils down to that stuff, does it not?
Yep.
I get blown away by these stories of forgiveness, and I think my screwed up head says stuff like I still can't get over the fact that because this is a God show, you got God people here talking about God stuff, that this God is forgiving me of being such an idiot. I really cannot. That's the hardest thing in the world. You all are talking about people screwing with you. I'm the idiot. I'm the one that needs forgiving. I haven't been abused and had, fathered be an idiot like yours or whatever. I'm the idiot. So to me, it's self-forgiveness. It's God forgiveness.
We're all in that same boat, though.
Yeah,
You get that,
absolutely.
eh?
Oh, totally. Yeah, we're all in that same boat.
Absolutely.
I need forgiveness from my family almost every day. But it's an issue of understanding God's heart. Jesus said, "I say what I hear the Father say, and I do what I see the Father doing." And if we call ourselves disciples, right, and we call ourselves Christians and believers, then we need to follow that model, right? And we don't have an excuse. right? We don't have a way out. You know, we don't have a pass, go and get $200 and that's okay. I mean, we are required to do what he did and to model what he modeled, right? And there is no quid pro quo. And until you can tap into
explain
that.
First time I heard that was in Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
So can you explain that?
Most men put strings to their actions, okay? In other words, I will do something for you as long as I get something in return for that.
Right.
A response, any kind of condition. It can be in a lot of different areas, right? Well, that's not what Jesus did, right? Jesus didn't ask us our opinion before he went to the cross.
Unconditional love stuff is what you're talking about.
Yeah, and unconditional acceptance. You know, in other words, we shouldn't have expectations of people. We shouldn't. In the truest form, we shouldn't have expectations of people.
I love that. I get that because then I don't get disappointed.
It's hard to do,
I
but
think
that's what we
everybody's an
should
idiot.
strive
But
for.
you see by taking the high road, and when you step out,
It's not taking the high road.
Well, but doing what's right, making that right choice, and the world is taking the high road. But I mean, for me to go and do as I know he wants me to, even though it goes against every grain, and I know that it's going to be.
But you can't do it on your own. It's done through the power of the Spirit. Now that's a whole other show, okay? But a New Testament believer that is a new creation, right, does not live by the flesh, and that's hard to do because there's a war that happens every day.
So you're talking about when you feel prompted, you have to go and do this.
You got to make a choice. You got to make a choice who you're going to surrender to. Am I going to surrender to my flesh, right, or am I going to surrender to the guidance of the Holy Spirit? That's what you have to choose.
Really quick, we have about a minute left. I want to ask you guys this, and I want you guys to jump in. How can guys who are struggling to forgive take the step in the right direction?
I think it's tied into what Kent just said about understanding forgiveness that's available for us first.
That's right.
When you grasp this concept that God forgives me unconditionally.
Yeah, what if we don't? That's where I'm at. Because I'm screwed with that one.
Okay, well, then that's where truth needs just to be brought into your heart and your mind. That is truth. God forgives us unconditionally.
And having those people in your life to walk you through that. I had people in my life who walked me through that. How much time we got, Jeff? About 15 seconds.
Is there anything that your son or your daughter would do, my 7-year-old boy would do that I wouldn't forgive him for?
We exactly.
Son-daughter thing, I get that, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a mirror image of how our Father treats us, right?
Back right after this. More good news sports right after this. Thanks.
The preceding segment has been brought to you by Wise Choices.
Welcome back to The Edge on Good News Sports. Listen, guys, forgiveness isn't a feeling, it's a choice. No matter what's happened to you, it is possible to forgive. The alternative is a life of bitterness, anger, and depression. If you need help letting go, find a friend who can listen and pray with you. For more information, for resources, please check out our website, goodnewsports.ca. Until next time, dump your poison, live on the edge with God.
Good News Sports has been brought to you by Faith Life Financial and Wise Choices.